Commend the chairman of the Commerce Committee. He and I have been working on this bill since 2007. As we mentioned when we introduced the bill, or when it was introduced yesterday, that this is the 18th short-term extension that we are on. And I think any person in America, any person who flies in America, any person who is subject to FAA regulation, and certainly any business person in America knows that you can't do long-term planning and assure that your agency is doing its work, knowing what they can expect in support from Congress in short-term extensions for over 4 years. That is not good business, it's not good management, and it is certainly not the way government should run. So I am in agreement with Senator Rockefeller, our chairman, that we need to act on this bill. It is, I hope, going to be an effort that is bipartisan, that we will address the issues that have held the bill up in the past in a reasonable way, so that we can get on with hopefully a 3-year authorization of the FAA, and especially so that we can start next gen. America is the premier user of air traffic control systems. Our system is based in the 1960s technology of ground operations and use of radar. We want to move to a satellite-based system that will increase capacity at our clogged airports, the bigger airports that have more traffic than they can accommodate, and where the traveling public is in the most need. We need the efficiency, and we need the modern technology. That's what this bill will set us on the path to do. So I agree with the chairman in that respect, and I look forward to working with my colleagues on their amendments that pertain to this bill going forward. I would like to take a few moments to speak to the amendment that is at hand, which is not really an amendment about the FAA authorization, but it is a very important amendment. And basically, it is Senator McConnell's amendment that would repeal the health care reform that was passed over a year ago. And he is trying to say, let's stop right now. We have seen every signal that the concerns that we had when we spoke against this bill in December of 2009, that all of the concerns are coming home to roost. In fact, the concerns that we raised are now being shown to be a huge problem in this country. The health care reform bill that was passed cost $2.6 trillion. Over 6,000 pages were added to the Federal Register to implement this law. All of this indicates that the bill does a whole lot more than my colleagues are referencing right now in the floor debate. Because when I hear the floor debate, the people who supported this bill are saying that all we did was fix a few problems with our healthcare system that we all agree on. But in reality, this is a bill that cost $2.6 trillion, $500 billion in new taxes on business and individuals, and it cuts $500 billion out of Medicare, a program that isn't working to the maximum extent possible. It's certainly not considered the most efficient program. Now we're cutting $500 billion out for a new government entitlement program that puts the federal government between patients and their doctors. Here are a few of the provisions that are in the 2,000 pages of the health reform law. First, if you don't buy government-approved health insurance for you and your family, the health reform bill says you must pay a new tax. That is the individual tax. If you own a business and don't buy government-approved health insurance, which is going to have a formula and a requirement for how much business has to pay and what has to be in it, then you must pay a new tax. And if business owners want to grow their employees over the 50 mark where it kicks in for businesses, then there will be costly new federal regulations that they will have to comply with. So here we are in an era where unemployment is at all-time highs, and we are putting a cap on employees for businesses that are going to incur huge expenses if they go over 50. So if an employer is in the 40 to 45 range, they are looking very carefully at not going above 50. Now, is that really what our economy needs right now? I don't think so. What we want is to encourage business to hire. That's what every one of us in this body should want, and we should be passing laws that would assure that business has the freedom to hire, not a stifling effect on that kind of effort. We need to get the government off the backs of our job creators and not put up miles of red tape and more bureaucracy and more regulations and more taxes and fees that would curb the ability to hire and still make a profit. Next, it was said during the health care reform debate that if you like your current health plan, you'll be able to keep it. But everything that has happened since that bill passed says you can't keep it, because even the administration is now admitting that when it issued the rules that employers now have to follow when deciding what health care plan it will offer, that because of health reform, by 2013, as many as 80% of small businesses will no longer offer the same health care plans that they offer today. Families that rely on their health savings accounts or flexible spending accounts, which have been a wonderful boon for families to be able to put money aside before taxes to be able to use on the health care expenses that they have that are not covered by insurance. That is being used by more and more people in the millions. But in the health care reform bill, there was now a restriction put, a cap on how much you could put aside, and you have to have a prescription drug to be able to pay for it with your pre-tax dollars. You can't now buy a bottle of Tylenol or aspirin off the counter and have your health savings account help you pay for that out of your expenses. So here you are, you and I, Madam President, have children, and are we going to stop and call the doctor or run get a prescription if we have a health savings account to buy the aspirin or the Tylenol? That is not helpful. And why would we put a restriction on what people can set aside for their own health care costs? Why wouldn't we make it easier for them? Instead, the health care reform bill makes it harder to use those pre-tax dollars. There is no reason for it. And I will have an amendment that will try to take the caps off and take the restrictions off so that you can provide for your health care out-of-pocket expenses with pre-tax dollars. That's the kind of incentive that we need, not the opposite, which is in the health care reform bill. If you're a woman under 50, whether or not you have access to routine mammograms is going to depend on a task force that was granted new and unchecked powers by the health care reform bill, and they have already, the same task force that is going to have that power has already given the indication that mammograms under the age of 50 are not necessary to be covered. Madam President, the women of the Senate stood firm years ago when the Clinton administration was trying to pass a health care reform bill to say, absolutely, we are not going to stand in the way of a woman and her doctor knowing her history and her family from having a mammogram whenever it's needed. Because there's not one person in this body that doesn't have a friend or a relative that has had breast cancer before the age of 50 and probably before the age of 40. So that is in the health care reform bill, and it needs to come out. This week, another federal court announced that the federal government could not force individual Americans to purchase a private product, even health care. The judge in the most recent case in Florida said that when Congress passed the health reform, it exceeded its constitutional power, and therefore the court voided the entire law. This is the second court that has found the health reform bill unconstitutional. Now, this lawsuit is going through the judicial process, and yet, even though it is being appealed by the Obama administration, it will most likely go to the Supreme Court of America. Now, we shouldn't have to wait for the Supreme Court to rule that this law is unconstitutional. We shouldn't have to wait for them to reassure the American people that Congress most certainly shouldn't be regulating anything and everything just because the federal government says so. We don't have to spend millions more in taxpayer dollars implementing a bill that ultimately could be struck down by the highest court in the land. The Senate has the opportunity, and I believe the responsibility today, to say, moratorium. Let's wait until the Supreme Court has ruled on this enormous bill and the enormous cost that is being incurred for implementation right now. Let's wait. Let's repeal this bill now and start all over so that we do not have to spend taxpayer dollars that we know are being borrowed to implement a bill that may be unconstitutional, and we have now had two federal courts that have said so. Why not repeal, support this amendment, and some of what is in the bill could be reenacted because it's good. But some of the things that I have just talked about should be repealed immediately. And most certainly, we could repeal the parts like the 1099 that will be another amendment that we can vote on. That 1099 form is the biggest thing I hear about from my small businesses in this country. And certainly those in Texas have said, what are you all doing up there? Well, of course, happy to say I didn't support this bill, but these are the kinds of things that we can repeal today and start all over, take the good parts of the Obama health care. Let's do away with the bad parts instead of spending millions of dollars to make a mom have to get a prescription from a doctor to get Tylenol with her health savings account. The American people have made their opinion on this bill known loud and clear. They spoke at the ballot box. Enough is enough. That's what the voters said. Enough deficit spending. Enough government intrusion into our businesses, our families, our lives, and our health care decisions. Madam President, the people of America support the repeal of this bill, and they will work with us to substitute a responsible health care reform that will allow them to have health savings accounts to provide for the costs not covered, that will give them affordable coverage, which we all want to have, but not with the government prescription, not with a government task force that can tell a woman that she doesn't need a mammogram before the age of 50. We don't need a task force to tell us that. We need the doctor who is looking at this patient and her family history. Those are the things that need to come out right now. Repeal and replace. That is what this Senate could do today, and we can move forward on a bill that we can get a bipartisan consensus to pass that I think would show the American people. We heard what you said. We know we can do better, and it is our responsibility today to do so. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.